Okay, so then we would be ready for session number 4, implementing NBS projects. So first two speakers will be Yvette Jöken from the Political Scientist Researchers at DuneWorks and Marco Diemann, who is in the development of the CitizenSay tool at Innova Integra. And they will be talking about how to involve citizens into the planning process. Nature for Cities guide for new governance models. So the general question is, are nature-based solutions the best option to solve the urban challenges you are facing as a policymaker? And if you opt for NBS, what would be the implementation process look like? Who needs to be consulted? Who needs to be invited to participate? And what is needed to facilitate the process in terms of knowledge, needs, and interests? During this brief session, we touch upon these issues and present 3 tools developed for Nature for Cities that support you in the planning process. Our model for reflexive governance of NBS, a process support tool for a tailored governance approach, CitizenSay, a digital tool that can be used to support participatory planning and collaboration processes, and least, the Nature for Cities implementation model handbook. Yvette, I think the turn is yours.
So good morning. In this session, we will talk about the implementation process of nature-based solutions, and in particular on how to involve citizens and stakeholders. I am Yvette Jöken from DuneWorks. Marco Diemann from Innova Integra is joining us as well for the Q&A session. Most of you are familiar with the definition of nature-based solutions, so I won't go into detail. There are 3 things important to mention. First, nature-based solutions promise to deliver multiple benefits, and the process can be more challenging than interventions that focus on a single domain. Secondly, nature-based solutions are aimed to tackle a diverse range of urban challenges that are not prefixed but identified within a specific context and usually exist of a varying myriad of issues. Thirdly, nature-based solutions are also not predefined interventions but cover a whole range of possible solutions. So for policymakers and practitioners responsible for the implementation of NBS, it is quite a challenge because the planning process is more complex and it is not simple to copy-paste. It's not a simple copy-paste exercise. In addition, it is uncertain how the NBS will evolve over time. Successful implementation usually requires collaboration with several departments within the local government, but also the involvement of experts, researchers, stakeholders, and local citizens. Collaboration is necessary because the knowledge to tailor the NBS intervention to a specific context is not present in a single department, but each of these stakeholders hold a specific piece of useful information and knowledge. The challenge is thus to collect and use this knowledge in a useful manner. This makes it impossible to come up with a one-fits-all approach to govern planning and implementation processes. A dynamic and reflective approach is more suitable to respond to local circumstances that may change over time. At the start of the project, there are a number of crucial questions to ask. Is NBS the best option, and what is required in terms of process to implement it? Within Nature for Cities, we sought to answer these questions. Here, we focus mainly on the organizational process and present 3 tools that have been developed for Nature for Cities to tackle these questions. First, we developed the step-by-step guide, a reflexive guide for policymakers and practitioners that will support them to identify the steps they need to make in the planning and implementation process. Second, Innova Integra developed CitizenSay platform for practitioners to communicate with their constituency and collect data. The project management tool furthermore supports practitioners in the process of managing a complex project. Thirdly, we are currently developing the Nature for Cities implementation model handbook, which is basically a bundling of work done in the project. This handbook offers an overview of how potential NBS interventions can be implemented in different contexts: the what, who, and how. Together, these tools form a support system for NBS interventions. Nature for Cities developed decision support tools such as the Nature for Cities platform and implementation model handbook to make knowledge-based decisions. In addition, we developed process support tools such as CitizenSay and the step-by-step guide, which support the organizational process. Step-by-step guide also supports in creating internal and external support for interventions by identifying the conditions in a local context needed to work with. The step-by-step guide is a very practical, hands-on tool explaining each step of a planning process, offering reflexive questions to help identify process requirements for the local context. Although it is presented as a linear process, we assume that in practice iterations are needed to cope with uncertainties. Therefore, monitoring and evaluation is a key aspect of the process and enables project coordinators to review and adapt when needed. This slide gives you an example of what the tool looks like. For each step, there is a general description. Then we explain which aspects need to be addressed and why. Lastly, it offers practical tools. The guide is built on placemaking because when designing an intervention, the social capital already present in the local community is a crucial fundament to build on. Moreover, the environmental justice component of the guide supports in recognizing the diversity of needs and interests in the local community. This gives rise to questions such as: who should be included in the process and how? Are they able to contribute? And what do they need to be able to participate in a meaningful manner? A deepening understanding of the local residents' needs and the community dynamic can help to prevent an uneven distribution of benefits and burdens, especially now when some already vulnerable groups are hit harder by the socio-economic effects of the pandemic, and many people are being pushed into poverty. This may add up to their vulnerability to climate change. Also, enjoying urban nature, which has psychological and physical benefits, may pose a risk, especially when other people disregard social distancing. Moreover, an economic recession resulting in austerity measures and budget cuts can threaten NBS investments. As advocates of socially just and sustainable climate adaptation, we need to be alert, identifying such risks timely. Participation is identified as a key aspect for successful implementation of NBS. It has many benefits, but it is important to understand that participation processes may differ from one context to another. Some projects fare well when implemented top-down by the government, while others are initiated and fully maintained by a community initiative. More often, we see a combined effort with various degrees of participation. The step-by-step guide does not prescribe a specific method, but allows to reflect on what is best given the local circumstances. When opting for a participatory approach, the NBS planning process can be complex and demanding. The CitizenSay platform can support project coordinators by facilitating communication and data collection. Now, CitizenSay is an integrated platform for citizen engagement and involvement throughout the decision-making and development process. The focus on CitizenSay is to enable structured, multi-stage, real-time, live interaction between different stakeholders and to document and analyze outcomes of discussions for later use. The module design is adjusted to NBS projects. CitizenSay modules let users create surveys to share with participants and lets users add numerous functionalities such as live voting, collaborative mapping, and document editing. Also, online meetings and discussions are possible. All CitizenSay functionalities can be used simultaneously by multiple users, and all activities can be recorded for later reporting. CitizenSay lets users define workflows so that they can create longer-term interactions around specific topics. An example sequence could be an initial online meeting, a follow-up survey, a follow-up co-creation session to generate a mission document and map activities to be undertaken, and regular follow-up emails. Workflows can be created as templates to be used by others. The Nature for Cities step-by-step guide will be available to use within CitizenSay on the Nature for Cities platform as an integrated module. CitizenSay automatically generates summaries in which all activities in workflow are documented in Office documents. CitizenSay also automatically analyzes discussion content and tries to identify the sentiment and attitudes of participants overall and towards the different topics of discussion for both voice and text discussion. This is still experimental and depends on local language use. The Nature for Cities implementation model handbook is work in progress. It combines the step-by-step guide with cases from the implementation model base and the method from the pre-selection tool developed for Nature for Cities. The implementation model database has been published on the Nature for Cities platform and offers a collection of case examples. The pre-selection tool is forthcoming and supports practitioners to identify the most suitable NBS together with the most suitable implementation model. While the tool is technical in nature, the handbook offers more context and case examples. The handbook focuses on 3 topics and 3 skills: rainwater at object scale, parks at district scale, and ecological networks at city scale. For each topic, 5 different scenarios are explained based on different types of governance models we've identified. In addition, corresponding cases from the database are presented to explain the who, how, and what of the examples. The handbook thereby offers detailed information on different types of governance models, explaining who is responsible for the process and how it is organized. It furthermore looks at the financial aspect of who is paying and how. Lastly, it looks at the business model behind the NBS, identifying the value proposition, ownership construction, revenue structure, and how the NBS returns value for and with the community.
Yeah, so obviously it depends on what type of platforms people are using. Our system is in principle designed to be used over sort of longer term interactions, which you call workflows, where you can schedule a longer process, and there are not many tools that do exactly the same thing. If you take a look at the slides, you see that we do things that we offer services that are identical to what we're doing right now, but this would just be one step in a longer process where we ask people to fill in a survey first, then they can write a document together, then they have like a virtual session like this one. And so we think our tool is, in that sense, it's unique. In other sense, we obviously allow for the integration of other tools as well. You can also just send an email out and then let's have a survey monkey survey that you can link to, and then it would be your job to condense the information from that yourself and then reintroduce it into our tool, for instance. That would be obviously possible, and we have a general way to include third-party systems in our tool. So you can all these tools that you've seen today, for instance, you can show to participants in the Nature for Cities online chat or online conference call as well. So for us, it's usually the people who are tasked with implementing a nature-based solution in this project, because somebody has to define these workflows and create them. In a more general sense, CitizenSay is meant for everybody who wants to organize something. So this is more in a general way, but we have some specific tools here, like a mapping tool and some like survey modules, for instance. They need preparation, and to create a proper interaction with other participants, you need to have some background knowledge and invest time. And I think in particular, since nature-based solutions can be quite costly to implement and the processes are long-term, I think it's more for the people who are tasked with carrying out the process related to the implementation of a nature-based solution.
Yes, and it's the same for the step-by-step guide and the Nature for Cities implementation model handbook, because I think that, they are both designed for general audiences, but I think in general, public officials and people working local governance are the majority of people who are responsible for the implementation of NBS, and they're usually also relatively large-scale projects and complex in nature. So I think we target them as our main audience, although the tools are developed and accessible for people who have a different role, of course, different responsibilities.
Yeah, for sure. So the platform is a tool set, and what we provide to users is, for instance, a templates based on the step-by-step guide, which they then can modify and change as they see fit. So let's say we have a process that is fairly long and fairly detailed in the step-by-step guide, but they wanted to reduce the number of tasks that they carry out. They can just edit that and move it around. And the CitizenSay tool is all localized in this instance. So we've got local language versions of it, or you can just change language for all of the municipalities that were involved in the project in the first instance. So we also can give that to people who don't speak English.
Yes, this is particularly tackled in the step-by-step guide, and it gives you some tools to deal with this. It doesn't go into depth because we cannot, I mean, every conflict is different, but when conflicts occur, the step-by-step guide gives you some tools to reflect on it and to discuss also underlying values and to recognize situations that might cause or might result into conflict. It's a very good question, and I think unfortunately I won't be able to answer it fully, but what I can say is that it's very important to decide at the beginning of a project, an NBS project, what kind of participation you foresee throughout the process, and it can depend on the political, cultural context of the city. If people are used to participate in projects, also if it's very common, if there are mechanisms in place that facilitate participation, but also if the project very much depends on participation. The other way around, there are also a lot of initiatives taking place, initiated by citizens and organized by citizens, and a mixture, of course, of both. So it depends on who is at the helm, who can decide who can participate. So it's always depending on the context, on the situation, on the competences, but also the capacity of a local community. And once you decide to have a participatory process, it's very important to have people also have an influence on who is defining the problem and who is defining the solution. So when you decide already what kind of NBS will be implemented, what the problems are, the participation process becomes instrumental and people don't have any influence, and they might get reluctant to further participate, or they get unsatisfied, or conflicts may arise because there are different opinions on what the problems and the urban challenges may be, or what would be the right solution. So if you are going to organize it in a participatory manner, it's very important to allow influence on defining the problems and the solution, and it may also result in discussions on whether or not an NBS will be adopted. So yeah, it depends. It's not, I'm not sure if it's a satisfactory answer, but yeah, it depends on the situation. It's very important that you, of course, have the technical knowledge and assessments on the one hand, and on the other hand, you have the social and economic issues. So it's always a trade-off between these three aspects, dimensions of NBS, and conflicts arise not necessarily about the numbers and the data, but about the interpretation and also about interests. So, and I think it's very important to understand that as a key aspect of the process, that there's always a controversy whether or not NBS should or need to be implemented, and also the ecological demand that something is happening, that something is done, and that we opt for a sustainable option to deal with climate change. So in cities, so it's always a push and pull situation where conflicts may arise, and it's very important for a project coordinator, and that's the most challenging aspect, I think, for an NBS project, is to balance the technical information, environmental information, all the assessments that have been done, but also the social aspect, what is happening between people, the interactions, and who has the power to push something or to decide upon something. So the step-by-step guide helps you to reflect on these issues at each step of the process to identify what kind of problems could occur and what kind of decision you need to make in these different phases of the process.